Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where we care about more what's on the outside than the inside of the magazine. And this month we're looking at June 1991, where all the magazines have decided to include a full commercial game. So let's check out Amiga Action, See You Amiga, and Amiga Format. Fight! First up is See You Amiga, which came with 2 jam-packed discs. We had 2 full games, a demo, and an application. The full free commercial game was Gravity, and boy, they picked a game that will take you some time to work out. I've been trying to figure out this game for a while now, and I think I'm just about there. You have a fleet of ships that you directly as well as indirectly control, and you also have to follow the orders that Starcom gives you, which will give you cash, which obviously you can use to upgrade and get more ships. And then eventually fight the evil Outies. That's if I'm following everything correctly, that is. The big issue with the game is it's dense. Really dense. And the manual, as well as various other guides, really don't explain it very well. And the 3 pages that See You Amiga gave it is not enough. I'm amazed anyone managed to work out how to play this release of the game from the magazine, as it doesn't even tell you how to control your ship, let alone how you move from one system to another. And the game itself doesn't really help as well, as the first thing it'll tell you is, hey, go off and form a new colony, which it will highlight on the map if you happen to bring it up, which you can do from the various icons you can see at the bottom. And pretty much all of them you need to double click to activate. So to look at the galactic map, we need to double click on this icon here, and then wait for this animation to play, which can take a while on a stock Amiga 500. You can even pan it around if you have the time to wait. But now we know where we're going, we need to travel there. And it's not just a case of pointing your craft in the right direction and then hitting the accelerator. No. Instead, you have to fall down a black hole. Now, there is a good chance you might be heading in that direction anyway, as every single object in the game has gravity, which you can see in the grid in the holotank, if you've got the right menu selected, that is. And all of these gravity wells do have an effect on your craft, but you can control yourself directly, even if it is a little bit fiddly. But either way, eventually you'll fall down a black hole and you'll end up in the system that you want. At which point you can load up your tubes with a colony pod, and then you can then single click to launch it. And just that alone would have been quite a lot in a game. But this one has you handling multiple ships that you can actually program and automate. You have drones that you can use in combat, and there's a whole evil empire out there that you have to take on. This game has a huge amount in it. It's just a shame it's a little bit too dense for its own good, and can be quite hard to chip away. That, and it needs a better manual or tutorial. The second disc has quite a lot of stuff on it, so we better get going. And first up is a demo for Warzone, a commando-style shooter from Core, which suffers from the same problems that many other games in this genre on this platform also have, that the movement and aim are locked together, so that can make hitting baddies while avoiding their bullets quite hard. And you can't even hold down the fire button, as that will trigger the special weapon, so you have to keep tapping it while also changing direction. Although this isn't a bad example of this type of game, as it has lots of weapons, which you will lose if you get hit once, and there's a lot of variety of things to shoot. And in many ways this is actually better than some of the official arcade ports that hit the Amiga, and it does look quite decent as well. as I mentioned, we actually have a second full game, and this is a PD title called Cave Runner. And yes, shock horror, it's a Boulder Dash clone. And from what I've seen, they haven't really added much to the game. But then I could barely make it past the first level, so there could be lots of interesting stuff hidden just past that. But I'm not a huge fan of Boulder Dash or its clones, so I didn't really get all that far into it. But I will say they did try to encourage you not to die. Not for the usual reasons that you lose a life or anything, but the screaming that it does when it happens. Someone went really overboard with using the sound abilities of the Amiga. And on that note, this disc also included Pro Tracker. Now I have all the musical abilities of a rock, so this really isn't for me. But I know how important this tool was to the Amiga, and getting a copy of it on a cover disc would have been really big for some people. And the nice thing is, they even included 2 bits of music. One that was playing on the main menu, and the other that's more than likely gonna get me a good old copyright strike, as it's the Amiga take on Axel F. So if you're not hearing 2 bits of music, that's going to be why. And this leads us on to the other parts of this disc, as they all link together. First up is this very simple music visualization demo. And in the magazine they describe how you can add your own pictures to it and make changes to it to be more personal. Because what they also want you to do is use the other tools on the disc to make your own demos. So all in all, quite an interesting and cool cover disc. We now move on to Amiga Format, and again we have 2 discs with another 2 full games, as well as games and application demos. Their full free game is Balance of Power. And this is more or less the first thing the game shows you. And I'd like it noted for the record that Amiga Format did not include the full manual, or even all the codes for the copy protection, so this might get a little bit rough. Your goal is to make it to 1997 without causing an all-out nuclear war, as well as trying to get more points than the other side. Now, points are based on doing actions, and these actions are why you need to read the manual, as you can see the current state of the world, and you can either help out or work against various governments. And this is all a means to an end to try and mess with the other superpower. Now in doing this, you might upset them slightly, and they might try and force you to react. And it's then up to you whether or not you'll back down or stand your ground. Get it right, and you'll actually gain some additional points. Get it wrong, and well, it's the black screen of death for you. You don't get fancy graphics for losing in this one. There are a number of difficulty settings, and as you go up through them, they'll give you more aims and options for you to play with. But you really will have to study that manual and consider the whole geopolitical situation at all times. Personally, I find this type of thing quite dry. There is so much for you to do in this game, even if all you really ever see is this screen. It's definitely interesting, but back then it definitely wasn't for me, and I think that remains the same now. The first demo, from a menu that seems to be hiding all the other options, is Atomino. And no, this isn't another variation of Atoms, though it might have a few things that might sound familiar. It's actually quite an interesting and unique puzzle game. Your goal is to create various molecules. You do that by placing atoms that have loose electrons onto a grid, and these can have 1, 2, 3 or 4 electrons, and you have to try and join them up, with the goal being for you to create a molecule that has no free electrons at all. Now sometimes this is simply all you need to do, just complete the number of molecules that's required. But other times you might need to fit them into a grid. or even finish off one that's already in progress. And as you play, more atoms will fall into the test tube on the side, and you can basically place them anywhere you want on the board, including replacing ones that are already in play. But when you do that, that will be returned to the next item in the test tube, so you can't get rid of them, you can only rearrange them. All in all, it's actually a fun little title, and I could see myself playing this quite a bit. Also included is a weird little PD title called Drive IFF, which you might have guessed is a driving game, and if you know anything about the Amiga, then you might also have guessed its party piece. And that is, you get your tracks by loading in images that you've drawn yourself, or at least ones that have been included on the disc. The core one looks pretty good. And looking at a few of the options, we can see that it uses the different colours to be the various surfaces, but you can tweak what you want them to be like. And then you can just drive around it in full 3D. I'm not a big fan of how they created that fade off look, it looks a little broken to me. But overall, it's a pretty cool idea and has a very Mario Kart look to it, even if the control system is nowhere near it. And to be honest, this really isn't much of a game. You can drive around the map, and if you really want, you can even time yourself doing a lap. But it's pretty much up to you when a lap starts and ends. And if you want more tracks, then well, you better get dpaint loaded and draw your own 8 colour images. It can load more colours than that, but it really doesn't like it when you do so. Such as what happened when I tried to load up the picture of the month, as it's multiple shades of grey, and yep, that doesn't look good at all. This is what it's meant to have looked like. And finally, for this cover disc, we have a demo for the 3D construction kit. A subject that could take a whole video on its own, and probably will do at some point. And this was the end result of all those Freescape games like Total Eclipse. It became its own game maker that was very powerful, almost like the Unreal Engine of its day. And this demo allows you to travel around this predefined world. You can edit some of the objects and even move stuff around like the shop. But you are quite limited in what you can actually do, like there's no adding new objects or editing any of the conditions. It's all very basic here in the demo, which you can't blame them, as if they gave you too much freedom, then well, you wouldn't need to buy the full thing. But if I remember rightly, I think the full version did get released a few years later, so we possibly could wait till then to look at it again. We now arrive at the last magazine, Amiga Action. And same with the others, we get 2 discs, but this time it's just a single full game as well as 2 commercial game demos. And that full game is Purple Saturn Day, which I think is best described as a sci-fi Future Olympics minigame collection. And if that sounds a little weird, don't worry, it will get odder. There are 4 events that you have to play, 3 times if you want to come out the eventual winner, and then get your smooch from the Queen. Those games are Ring Pursuit, in which you have to race around the rings of Saturn, and while doing so you'll have to weave your way between various coloured markers, all while avoiding the rocks and rubble that make up the rings. But that's not all, as there's also your opponent racing around as well. There's a real nice sense of speed as you fly around, and you can go really fast if you want to. But you probably should keep your velocity in check, at least while there's lots of stuff going on, as it can be very easy to just fly straight into a rock or miss the markers, and thus not get many points. And that is the main aim of all these games, to gain more points than your opponent. The next game is the Tronic Slider, and it's you versus your opponent on a grid in a hovercraft. The goal is to collect these glowing dots that will explode out of this big glowing ball, which you do so by shooting. This is all played out on this 3D looking world, but this time the controls aren't quite as friendly as the last one. You can play all these events with either the mouse or the joystick, but each game tends to have a control method that's a little better. For this, I think the mouse is best, as you can shoot with the left mouse, and then use the combination of the right mouse button and a direction to turn your craft around. Without holding down a button, moving left or right will make you slide around. If you push forwards, then you'll move forwards, but pushing back does nothing, you cannot reverse. So you have to really get used to holding down the right mouse button to turn yourself around, and then quickly trying to accelerate to try and grab those little dots. And it is quite tricky, as obviously the other player will be trying to do the same thing. The third game is Time Jump, which seems more complicated than it actually is. You use the cursor to shoot the various targets that show up, and that will help charge up your power. But you'll have to use a small amount of it each time to slowly charge up your coil that will then release more targets. Or at least that seems to be what's happening here. Eventually you'll get the full charge, and then you can do the time jump. That will send you flying through time, and flying through points. And then eventually you'll just get this random image on the screen. I've never worked out what it's meant. But usually if you hit enough of those targets, then you should win, I think. The final game is Brain Bowler. And this is easily the best and the most frustrating game here. The game plays across what effectively feels like a very large circuit board, with both you and the AI opponent controlling these animated coloured things that look like something out of Tron. Now you can throw these at the board to trigger stuff. This might include these little switches or pushing a spark across a gap. The goal is actually to get those little sparks into slots on the side of the face that's on your side of the board, which just so happens to be the right hand side. And that is not a simple thing to do, as pretty much all of them will require some direct intervention to get them into the right place. And some of those do have quite a few steps that you'll have to accomplish. One of the main ones is when a spark enters a collector, and they will generate a power ball. You can then pick that up and then use it to energize the blocks, which I always thought looked a bit like memory chips. With them prepped, a spark can then travel across them. And obviously what you want to try and do is have all of them prepped so it can just travel all the way around and keep going. Otherwise it will turn back round and you'll have to wait for it to return again. But the real trick to this level is that each player can mess with the other, as those balls can't exist in the same space, so you can knock them about, grabbing someone else's energy ball and using it on your side, or flipping some of their switches so a spark gets stuck, or even trying to break some of the things that they've put down. This actually got its own sequel. I've not had the chance to check it out myself, but once I'm done with this video, I'll have to track down X-Tays. Overall, this is a fun if limited game, because it really is single player, you can't play against your mates. And also, this is one of those games that had already done the rounds along the budget lines, so it wasn't the newest or the most exciting game by this point. But it was the most accessible free game that we got to see today, which is saying a lot for this being Purple Saturn Day. And so now we get to check out the last two demos. The first up is Metal Mutant, a game that I've heard of but not played. And this seems to be a demo of a near finished game, as we have the title screen and menu, as well as the whole first level, which has you stomping around in one of three metal machines: the mech, the dinosaur, and the tank, each having its own abilities. so you'll have to switch out your body depending on what monsters are on screen, and you will have to kill all the monsters before you can move on. This might mean using the dino to attack things that are low down, the tank to shoot things at a distance, or using the ability to jump of the mech. It is interesting having you switch between the various metal machines, and you even pick up upgrades as you go along. Now personally, I think this is a bit of an odd looking game. It's got lots of detail and it's technically very good looking, but I find it all a little bit ugly. I'm not sure if that was the intention or not, but it's not an art style I'm particularly fond of. So I'm not sure if this demo has sold me on the game or not. The final demo for the day is Hero Quest, another game that I know of but not really played, and that includes both the computer as well as the board game. And once again, this seems like a demo that's based on a near finished game, as you can select up to 4 heroes to enter the maze. And we even have the shop, even though I don't think we actually earn any cash in the demo. What we do have though is a single maze that we can play, so let's just jump right in. Each hero takes it in turn to flip a coin to decide how many steps they can take, and then it's up to you to use them up. You can also spend each turn searching for secret doors, or attacking monsters that you might happen to stumble across, or having to defend yourself against them. And the whole combat seems to be automated from what I can tell, but if it's not, I'm sure someone will let me know down in the comments. The goal is pretty simple, find your way to the exit, but that will require you finding hidden doors as well as fighting your way through monsters. I do like the isometric look to the game as well as its overall style, though it probably could do with a bit more animation. The goal it seems is just to find the exit, and the first person that does so will win some extra gold. So I think this is more meant to have up to 4 players working against each other than with each other. But overall, it's a pretty fun game, and I can see why this gets brought up quite often. And there we have it, 3 stuffed magazines covered. And this was quite a hard one to call as well. But I think in last place it has to be Amiga Format. Balance of Power was just a little too dry for me. But Atomino was the best demo of the day. In second place, I give it to See You Amiga. Gravity I think might be a great game, but it needs way more time for me to really bring that out of it. And the other disc did have a few cool things. So I think that means Amiga Action is first. And while Purple Saturn Day isn't the greatest game ever, it was more fun out of the gate than all the others. Plus those demos were pretty full featured. And so there we have it. If you agree, disagree, or even if you know how to play Gravity, let me know down in the comments. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, and that was me not getting a kiss from the Queen of Saturn, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching this cover disc face-off. If you got this far, then you might consider using those buttons under the video, as I've been told that they can really help you out. But if you're not sure yet, then you could check out a couple of the videos that should be on the screen right now instead. And all I can say is thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.